So just a couple quick pre-show show notes. First off, I have a speech impediment, so you'll have to forgive me for that. On top of that, my presentation is more of a tech demo than a fully formed research paper. Due to the content that we will be covering, feel free to stop me mid presentation and ask a question so I don't lose you. All right. So, first off, I would just like to thank the Whittier Scholars Program for not flagging my title, "How Not to Be a Internet Peasant." So, our first question is, of course, what is a internet peasant? Um, Peasantry, in our case, is defined more as a relationship where a medieval peasant, right, works on the local lord's land and exchanges their labor for protection. Our more modern peasant, right, exists on a platform that they do not control, right? They live on the local megacorp's platform and carry out operations each day that generate data that corporation can then monetize. And in exchange, they receive a convenient and seamless experience on the internet. Now, this presents two basic problems. The first one, of course, being that one's personal data is being sold, but the second one is more insidious. You see, as your data is collected, it is then taken and used to train a algorithm that can, in its own way, predict what content can be presented to you to elect a certain response, right? We're all familiar with how the search engine Google, right, uses the data that it picks up in order to change the results that gives you, right? I think um, a more useful example would be Wikipedia, right? So imagine if when you looked up something on Wikipedia, let's say cats, right? That the content of that article would change based on on who you are. And on top of that, the people controlling that content are trying to sell something to you, right? So the way that you encounter the world depends on the interests of people trying to sell you on their product. So in our endeavor to escape internet peasantry, we have two major goals. The first one being to protect our data, but the second and more profound one being to protect our perceptions. All right. And so in order to do that, we have to ditch these large scale digital platforms entirely, right? We need to create our own platforms, and that's where we come to these three vital services that I believe any internet platform should provide, right? That first one being a basic search engine functionality, but one that isn't biased, right, and isn't bought out by advertisers, right? The second most important utility is email, and then finally, cloud storage is, well, it's mostly convenient. It's not necessary, but I like it, right? So to facilitate this, right, you have to generate your own platform, right? So for my project, I created such a platform, right? And it has these three major components, right? First, we need a domain name system service to help people find our platform. Then we need a virtual private server, right, to host our services. And then finally, we need a HTTP and proxy server that we can use to direct traffic between our services. Okay, so moving on first to our domain name service. Right, I'm going to take a 30-second break. If anybody wants to look up the domain name on the site, so you can go to www.noahwilson.tech, right, and there you'll find the website. That's sort of the face of this platform. Okay, so how a domain name service works in summary is that when you input that name, right, your computer actually reads it backwards, right? So instead of reading it www.noahwilson.tech, it starts at that .text section. Okay, it then takes that and goes to a high level server and asked it, Mr. .text server, where can I find Noah Wilson? And it's most likely that this server won't know, so it'll say, I'm not sure, but I have server X in California, and they might possibly know. All right, and so you go there, and server X knows, and server X will present your computer with a datum known as a record. And what this is very simply is it's connecting that URL that I've just given you to a specific IP address that then can be referenced back to my server. Okay. Now, we aren't just hosting that site. Of course, we also need to create our search engine, email, and storage, right? And so within our domain name server, we can create the subdomains that rely on a secondary record called a CNAME, right? And what that does is that it takes your request and that extra bit of data in front of it, right, and routes it through back through my server. Okay. So now, once we get onto the hardware itself, we come to our HTTP proxy server. Okay, so I'm sorry, forgive me. So this server functions almost like a gatekeeper for our services, right? So in the same way that it handled your request for my basic site, right? It will also handle all the subdomain requests and route them properly to each specific service. Okay. So now that we have our platform developed, we can start to build utilities on top of it. Good. So what you see in front of you is the list and summary of each service that has been deployed on the server. So I would like to remind you of those three critical services that we discussed at the start. We have our search, our email service, and our cloud storage, going from left to right. Okay, so that first service is a meta search engine. Right, going back, our principal issue with services like Google is that they were what's known as opinionated opinionated search engines, right? And that you make a request and they will return what they believe is the correct answer. A meta search engine works differently. and that you will submit your request, and then instead of it's self-searching, it will then go to Google and Bing and DuckDuckGo and pull them, right? And then find the most popular answers among them and return it to you. Okay, and you'll note that this slide also comes with a URL, so you're free to go and check out search.noahwilson.tech to see my implementation. Now, the major benefits on top of it being a meta search engine is that it is extensible, in that we can go through our preferences and select which resources we want pulled, right? So let's say that we don't want Google at all. We can go through and instruct it not to pull Google, right? Let's say we'd like to add a service like Reddit. We can go through and tell it to also add pull Reddit on top of that, right? And finally, the most important benefit is that when you control your own search instance, you are not obligated to log your own search history. Right. So all of that data, right, which would be usually stored and fed to your algorithm, can instead just be deleted. Right. Our next service is email. Now, email is actually a fairly complicated web service, in that it's two different servers working simultaneously. So on one end, we have what's called a postfix server, right, which controls our emails routing and receiving. Okay, this is this function sort. This functions as a sort of a first defense against spam and malicious content, right? On the other end, we also have a service known as a dovecot server, right? And this server's whole job is to capture and store email so that we can then access it through a service like Mozilla Thunderbird or Microsoft Excel. Now, it's kind of difficult to point you to a URL to show email. So you can email me at noah@noahwilson.tech if you feel so inclined. All right. Our final service is our cloud storage service called SyncThing. All right. This one's at access via sync.noahwilson.tech, but when you type it in, it's not gonna go somewhere, because of course I don't want all of you accessing all my files. So we're going to have to deal with this screenshot that I took. Right. So what differentiates SyncThing from a regular server such as Google Drive is that SyncThing is a directory syncing service, in that there is a folder on my server, a folder on my computer, and a folder on my phone. And SyncThing's entire purpose is going to be making sure that all three of those folders match up. Right. So I may take a photograph on my phone, have that then be consumed up to the cloud, and then synced onto my own personal computer. Okay. So With those three, our our conclusion to this project is as follows, right? The biggest one being that, no one here is probably going to actually end up doing this. I mean, I've been a computer science student for 4 years, and this project took me 2 months. So it's kind of a knowledge gated. Um, on top of that, each person paying for their own distributed server space is ultimately going to be extremely expensive and extremely efficient, right? Finally, these are all services that are heavily dependent on a Linux-based operating system, which your common consumer just isn't familiar with. So our solutions then are to focus more on the development of a community managed, community operated infrastructure, right? Instead of taking your business to a Google, right? You can find a service that's more small scale, more accountable to do your searching and your syncing through, right? Finally, for a experience that's more user friendly but still very similar to this, you can use services like the Freedom Box, which is a a bit of hardware that you can install in your home that will deliver these same sorts of services. So yeah, on that note, I'd like to open the floor to questions.